So basically, here's what we got. We got two necks here. We got two base 6 necks. You know how I know this? This was a requested one, and while setting everything up, getting it the way we wanted, we made this one just to make sure everything works. So we have an extra base 6 necks. Base 6 necks. I'll admit, we have more. But we're going to get some frets on these things. Now they're different. Obviously not just in color in the woods, but they are different in the fact that this one has a combo radius on the fretboard, and this one is pretty much, I think it's just a 12 or a 10. Let's take a look and find out. First thing you want to do is see what you're dealing with the fretboard. It is 10, so this one's 10 all throughout, which is kind of OEM. And then this one starts out with the 10, gets to a 16 by the time we're done, so it's kind of a funky little thing. It's almost 16, more like 14, but it's about as 16 as you can get. We're going to need to make sure that our fretboard is flat. By this we use a straight edge. You don't need to use a slider one at this point because the frets aren't in there, but this is what we have that's most accurate most of the time anyway. And there you go. Now you're going to see a combination of tools I'm going to be using. Some of them are very spendthrift and some of them are pretty expensive. You don't have to spend a lot of money on doing frets if you're just going to do one or two here and there, but if you're going to get into it, really, you're better spending. A lot of them are going to come pre-radius if you buy them just in the little packets like this. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the best way to buy it is either through these tubes or in the coils. Now my stainless, that's what these are going to be. Right now I only have in tubes. They were out of the coils at the time. That's all nickel. And that's another thing we talked about, but I'm not going to get into that. Today we're going to be working with the stainless. Now this is medium jumbo. About what we can call medium jumbo. You know why it's called medium jumbo? No. Because it's not fully jumbo. Alright. Now these, since they come straight, they do need to be radiused. And there's a little bit that I already radiused once before. Now when it comes to radiusing, you can get one of these little tools here, and again, if you get a good one, you won't have to fight as much as I do with this one. Kind of get it started with your least favorite finger, and then start grinding it with this thing, and there you go, boom. Yeah, boom, like that happened in 12 seconds. If it weren't for the great editing, you would have saw, it took me about 20 minutes to mess with this thing. This is, again, where you got to get them pre-radius, or you spend a little more money. Now that's going to be more than, I hope so, more than a 10-inch radius. No, actually that's a 12 exactly. So we're going to save that to do this, and we're going to tighten this thing up a little bit more. And I'm going to show you why getting this to the exact radius isn't quite as important, because we're going to be using a radius call to actually put the frets in. And we've done our best to make sure that the fretboards are radiused properly. And for those of you who want to know more about why we radius fretboards, please leave a comment, because especially if you play classical guitars are not flat. They don't do anything with radius. So those are running between 10 and 12, thereabouts. This one is ridiculous. That's 7 inch. It's not even 7. I think it's tighter than. Yeah, it's like 5.5, 6 inch radius. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to this guy. Now this is a clamping little arbor press, and a lot of guys use this type of arbor press. This is a Harbor Freight unit. Again, you can go on the thrift, you can find these things just about everywhere. You take this thing off, and then you drill a hole if it doesn't already have one, and you could epoxy these little cauls. You get these things separate. A lot of different places online you can get them, and a lot of different values, ratings on them. Again, I wouldn't go too cheap, but you don't have to spend $7,000 or more on it. So usually these little cauls, if you get it, a lot of times it looks like that. They come with these little blocks, and they've got the radius in them. Most of them are made out of some sort of brass or bronze, and then they'll have, see that little groove? So they have that little groove, and what that's supposed to do is actually cut into your fret material. And that's going to clamp it down to match the radius of the fretboard, so you don't
overmash the wood, you don't leave it sitting up at all, so it's going to clamp down evenly across that fret slot. So we already know that we're going to end up with doing a combo on this one. So I'm going to pull out all the ones that I think are going to fit that combination round, because it obviously isn't a matter of 10 and 16. There's going to be some division in there. I'm just going to put in the 10 first, because we're going to do mostly 10 along the way. So this is all the prep work. Now a lot of times when you see guys on videos, they're moving right past all the prep work. You're just seeing them either hammer it in, or maybe see them cutting frets, or maybe even finishing frets. When I do a fret job, you've seen it. It's what, a good day? Wouldn't you say, from start to finish? I'm not going to cover that in a 7.5 minute video. Just so you guys know, we're just going to cover the basis real quickly on the stuff that we do. And then if you want more videos, let me know. Please leave a comment. But right now, we're just going to talk about getting the frets in there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut all the frets out. And this is where you don't want to cheap out, guys. You want to get a really good fret cutter. So I'm just going to lay that thing right across that fret slot. And I'm going to get as close as I can to get the final size. And then I'm going to nip it. Then I'm going to put it in 1, because that's fret number 1. Now, when I say nip it, if you see the fret tang and the way the fret is shaped, let me get you a clean edge. So yeah, here's a clean edge. So you see that it's like a T, right? You got the curved part on top, and then you got the part that's actually going to go in the slot. We call that the tang. When you cut, you want to cut with the tang. So parallel with the tang, not parallel with the top. Okay? Because if you do this, you're going to mash the end of that tang, and you need that, because that's what actually goes into the slot. So I'm going to, again, size it up about as good as I can. Sometimes you could put it a little bit over, but I'm not going to worry about that. There's more than enough wire here. Just snip it and then put it in the thing. Okay, and then we're going to do that on these have 21 frets. So we're going to do that however many frets we've got. So now another way of organizing our trim offs is to do this. Since we're doing 2, and I only have 1 set of holes in this primitive little device that I've created. Just do this. So you just lay them out, you know, across where your frets are going to be. And then you put a little piece of tape on it, and then, like magic, you've got them. Now, if you double this over, about like that, or if you want to, for extra security, put a little bit of extra tape on it, then as you're fretting, you just pluck them off. So that's just another way of doing it. There's like 15 billion ways of doing it. One of the other things that I think is very important about your fretboard when you're going to put frets in is making sure that it's clean. Can you hear the crinkling paper? Making sure that it's nice and clean and dry. You don't want it all real oily, but at the same time, you don't want it raw. Especially with maple, you don't want a raw fretboard. Especially when it comes time to, you know, doing the sanding. And anytime we sand metal, whether it be nickel or stainless, especially nickel is really bad, it's going to leave black marks. You want to make sure that your neck is ready. In this case, we've oiled these up. I can still feel a little bit of that oil. So I'm just going to get it nice and dry. It's not oily, but you know, you want to make sure it's nice and dry. And along with that, it's not just the surface, but actually inside the fret slots themselves. The way I like to do it is just take this guy here. This is an old saw blade. This is for a Japanese pull saw. I just take just the blade. That way you don't have to worry about being clumsy with the handle. I've got the thing on the handle for when I'm actually cutting slots, which is a whole other topic. Because obviously now that we're using CNC a lot, cutting our slots with CNC. Prior to that, I had a blade in overhead saw, radial arm saw, and also times I'd even use a blade in the table saw. And then there's good old-fashioned cutting by hand. So there's a lot of ways to get your slots. These happen to be cut with the machine, but they've gotten dirty. As you can see, I'm getting stuff out of that. A little Goomba. You don't want Goomba in with your frets. So right now, it's all about just getting the gunk out of there. Another tool that you don't want to cheap out on, a fret tang nipper. I have used other tools. They do make steel nippers that you can modify. I have tried them and they just don't work as well as these. So whenever we're going to be pressing these in, there's 2 rules of doing it. One, you can just press it in. You'll have a little bit of this tang sticking out to the edge and you just file it down. There's been millions of guitars made that way. For me personally, especially when it comes to stainless, that's just too much filing I got to do on the end. little bit more demanding of your tools. And in that demand, sometimes you have a chance of really messing up the outside edge of your woodwork. However, when I do the nickel, a lot of times I'll take the nickel right off this roll. It's already a 10-inch radius. I'll just put them in, boom, nip it, not worry about the tangs. That does two things for me. One, I can pick up the neck off the shelf and know it's nickel. I know just by looking at it. Now this little tool, you could adjust this how you want. I've already adjusted it the way I like it. You see how that fits right in there like that? Okay, so this goes all the way up against that little edge, and you can just boom, and look what that does. Now some folks will grind that down a little bit extra, and you could do that with a file. If this had some binding on it, especially classic binding, I would. I find with what we're doing today, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Boom. And then we're just going to do times 21, and then we're going to do the ones that are on the orange tape. And as you can see, these little things, they'll go flying if you don't have something to catch them on. A lot of times I'll have just an old rag or something, or I try to do it over a bucket. It's really bad when you get them in the bottom of your shoe and then go walking on the nice laminate floor in the house with those little dents in the floor. Don't ask me how I know this. By the way, so this is what I'm talking about. This is a steel nipper thing. And these things, again, it works, but you have to modify that first of all, and you could go all the way over, so there's really no stop. I kind of just use the square of the tool itself to stop, and I'll tell you right now, it's not as clean. And look at this handle. Look at that handle. Yeah, these things cost like $1,500, but good grief, look at the handle. I'm sorry, that was a Stumac jab I didn't need to do. But I did it because, you know, they are expensive. But look at that. So sometimes, guys, I'm not kidding you, I think they're not $1,000, but they are quite pricey, but they're so worth it. Because I could tell you right now, this thing wasn't cheap either, and look at the difference. You know, sometimes they're on sale. When you find them on sale, even better. So this is another little trick that you don't have to do. I've done it without, but man, it makes life a lot easier if you do it. So what we're doing is we're making a V channel on the top of that, and it just makes the frets go in so much easier. You don't have to grind. I'm not trying to grind a lot of wood. I'm just trying to make it just a little easier around that slot. When it comes to frets, the thing that's important is you want the metal in the wood, and you want to make the metal comfortable to the player. Everything else, optional. Another option that I like is put a little bit of glue in there. And you can use just about any glue. The glue is not holding the fret in. It's filling all the blanks around the wood when that tang goes in. So you could use Elmer's if you want. I like using super glue. So once we got our fret in there, then we're just gonna walk it over to this guy here, and we're gonna pull that down. Nice and easy, doesn't take much, and then look at it. Now the way it should look, see how this one's up a little bit? You're gonna hit that with the hammer, but it should look nice and flat all the way across. Well, sometimes the little end just wants to stick up a little more. Big deal. That's a lot of it because, you know, we trim that tang away. That's why I like using super glue. I mean, I wouldn't use it for welding. It's not really made for metal. It does hold those little tang ends down better than Elmer's. And then we're just going to do that, just a repeat session, and I'll just very slowly walk it along. And sometimes I'll do as many as 4, but usually no more than 3. We're not installing them with the hammer. The hammer is just kind of getting it pressed in so it'll stay while we walk it to the press. Now my normal little fret corner of the shop really is that. It's just a corner of the shop that I normally would use for fret pressing, and the fret press is mounted to that table. I unmounted it so we could put it on this big workbench so you could see for this video. But by not having it mounted, it's actually disciplining me because you could easily pull too hard on it, and when I go to pull too hard on it now, watch what happens. It wants to lift off the table. So that's actually good because that's keeping me from pressing too hard. Now I like to take this guy, and this is normally what we would use after we're done. You want to check to see if they're level to each other, and so you would use a little fret rocker. What it does is, like, see right there, you can hear that. This one's really good because you can hear an audible click. So that means this guy is taller than these two. When I span it here, those guys are fine. This guy is taller than these two. The reason why I like to do this while I'm installing frets because it's a lot easier for me to correct it. Rather than trying to sand it, if I'm going to correct it later, I'm going to be sanding the fret. Whereas now, you see, all I did is I put it in a little bit. Now, if I'm not able to get it with the hammer, I'll just put it right back in the press. But see how I got it done? Look at that. It slows me down a little bit because it would be real easy if I was just factory boy slamming in frets and then deal with it later. But by doing it this way, that's less sanding and filing I gotta do. And to me, that is everything when it comes down to finishing these later, because you know, when we're sanding it and flattening them to get them all nice and level, we gotta then go back and round them again. So the less you have to sand off, the less you have to re-round, and the better it is, because you got more metal, more material, it's gonna last longer. Okay, so now there's two things for you guys watching that I could show you real quickly. One is, you may notice, do you get a little bit of a dribble of that CA glue? All you gotta do is take a little razor blade, just do that. Now you could do all these when you're at the end, because I can guarantee you we're gonna get more. And I'll do that because it's not gonna dry anymore. It's not gonna be any easier or harder to do it now or later. The other thing is, now some of you guys watching may have already commented that, yeah, James, I'm not gonna go out and buy a fret press and all the stuff to do that, and I do it without. Yes, I'll show you two ways. One, hammer it this way. This part's the same, and then this part changes up a little bit. So we're gonna take with the hammer, and you could get, this is a $10 hammer, guys. I got it from CB Goody like years ago. Not high dollar equipment at all. The difference when you're hammering it is you want to kind of push and hammer at the same time. So I'm knocking that in, and it doesn't hurt to wear earbuds when you're doing this. And see, my finger's holding this in. That way I'm not just gonna like pop it right back out. And then start working this way. As you can see, it takes a little longer, but it is doable. So if you're only doing like one or two here and there, maybe you're refretting your favorite old guitar, you can get one of these for 10 bucks and then not buy extra. Now that's one way to do it. Okay. Keeps knocking loose a bunch of junk. Okay, and then I test it. And believe it or not, that hammer, I got it set deeper than this part right here on this one. Now another way, they make these tools, these special pliers that act with the call system just like this. And you just clamp them and you could do that. Those cost more money, believe it or not, than this guy. But you can get these parts of the call for 15, 20 bucks, you know, and it comes with all the little inserts. So here's another way of doing it. You take this part's the same. What changes now is put this guy in here. And now on this I'll usually use the backside. It's a little softer on the ears. And like that. Smack yourself in the thumb, scream really loud, use some extra words if you like. And usually it does a pretty good job. I think this has a 12, I didn't change it, so it's a little bit off. You still want to use the same call that you would normally use. And then if you do something like I just did, it doesn't take much to fix it with the hammer. Go back to this guy, make sure everybody's all copacetic. Look at that. Okay, and if you notice on these things, again, just a cheap one. You could pay more, get some nicer ones probably. It's a piece of aluminum, or steel actually, I think this one's steel. But what they do is, see how the spans, obviously on your frets, are gonna get tighter. So it's made to compensate for that. So as they get closer, you turn it. So what we did here is this one is just not holding like we want it to. It could be because where the tang is clipped. So what I'm going to do is I put a little super glue on there, and I'm going to take some of this accelerator, and while I'm holding it down firmly with the press, just hit it with the accelerator and just give it a moment, because we know it will shape. We've hit it with the hammer, but we just want to make sure that it doesn't pop. And we'll check it. Well, we'll really be able to check it once we get these frets in. But I can tell you, if I run the gauge on it like that, it's right in the ballpark of the others. This guy could probably come down a little bit. Now, as a matter of fact, it looks like this guy is higher than anything. Let me try. Yeah. So we know that guy is down now because he's lower than this guy. Beauty. Done. Okay, one of the other things that we didn't discuss is, since a lot of our fret slots now are done on CNC, take for granted that most of the time the bit does its job and cuts exactly the depth that we ask it to. Whereas when you're hand cutting, sometimes you don't get it deep enough. And I think that's the case here, is even though these were cut on the machine, I think either through the finish sanding or whatever else we did, I think it's not deep enough there now. And sometimes the only way to get through it is to just start over. I'm just gonna cut that slot a little deeper. Let's see if our trick worked. Oh, I could feel it. Goes in a lot easier. Hardly any pressure. That was the problem. Like I said, we don't mind fixing a little bit in the sanding. Try to eliminate as much of that as we can. Yeah, golden. Right. Do the other 5, you lazy bum. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the cleanup part. Sometimes you get that little extra super glue, scrape it away, and just lightly touch it. It'll come off. We've oiled these boards up so well that it's not going to stick to it too much. Obviously, we don't want these sharp tings, so we're going to come by and clip. Just take the ones that are just a little bit extra. Most of these we trim pretty close, so no big deal. And for these, I kind of come at it a little bit of an angle, so I'm not 100% straight up and down. Now, if you don't have the desire to invest in a tool like this, and you can't find one that's cheaper that will be adequate to do, some companies do offer pre-sliced frets if you know exactly what neck you're going to be putting it on. And in some cases, those will have that nice pretty little ball end on them all ready for you too. The thing about those, you got to be really careful, make sure you're dead on target when you put them in. Because if you're not, then things can go awry. But that's why I always just like doing it this way with the wire and then cutting them. It is funny how sometimes you'll see stuff later, yeah, that you may not have noticed earlier. Ta-da! All right. Yep. As you go, you'll start noticing things that sometimes need readdressing as you're going. And get down that thing. I don't see any more high ones. They look pretty good. Obviously, these are still too sharp on the end. So now what we do, and this helps a lot of times. I'll use the big vise for it, but it doesn't hurt just to do it the old-fashioned way on a bench. I like to take a little squeeze clamp, put this guy down, and then take this guy here. And you'll see this is a dual cut, so you've got a bevel on one side and 90 degree on the other. Going only away from the headstock. I'm going to try to get these guys as flush as I can to the edge of the fretboard. You hear that sound? That's a terrible grinding sound. That's what we want to hear, believe it or not. Now this one, sometimes I don't always get as tight as I'd like to with that. So sometimes I'll use this one. You can really hear. So I'll just try to hold it in the 90 degree mode and then turn it when I do want the bevel. Okay, and you just keep doing that until you get all the way down to that wood. Okay, so now I got a little bit of black stuff there. Just taking one, this pad here, kind of do like that. This was sticking out a little more, which is a bummer that we scraped it, but at the same time, it's like, well, if it was sticking out, then that means that we needed to finish it a little bit more anyway. Our main thing was to finish the fretboard so we could press in. So sometimes just a little sandpaper. It's a little 320, so it's not going to take off a lot of the finish. It's going to help speed it up a little bit. That's good. We'll just clean that up later. We got the little notches from where we saw it through. What I did is I just filled in with a little bit of super glue, CA, and then I just take this 220 grit, just start sanding down. And what that does is it sands in a little bit of that wood, mixes with the CA to make like a hot mix, okay? And it just fills in those little holes. And as you probably notice, as it's going, it's also sanding a little bit down on the fret ends. And then I'll do the other side. Now this side, I haven't done anything with the file yet, so I'll probably cut my fingers doing this. But I'll do it anyway. Actually, let's just do the maple one. I don't want to cut my fingers right now. Do the maple one, same thing. Now, on the maple, unfortunately, it does leave a little bit of an off-colored look to it, but we try our best to blend it as well as we can. And all this gray stuff, as you see as Keith is going, it's kind of gotten some of the metal powder in there. All that we're just going to scrape away later, because we still have a lot of sanding to do. We're going to touch up the finishes here and there. I usually try to batch out 3 to 5 necks at a time. It really doesn't take me that much longer because I'm basically just repeating steps while all the equipment is out, just one after the other, and it makes it a lot easier to do. It does take time to get things done right, especially your first time. If you're just doing one, especially if it's your first one, take your time. All right, so we're going to close this video now. We've got it to this point, and everything that after this is going to be all about fret leveling and crowning, and that's a whole other video.
a lot more tips on how we do that. So come back for that one if you'd like. And yeah, we'll get this going. I've got other videos, like I said, there's a lot of videos on YouTube about all this, and so this is just how I've found to do it. If you got a better way, let me know. Please leave a comment. Leave links if you got videos that you'd like me to watch or other people here watching this to watch. I'm all for it. I mean, it's all about educating ourselves and getting some fun stuff out there. Like, look at that rosewood. All right, thanks again for tuning in to Dude Craft Guitars.